My name is Joe O'Lear, and my website is thinklikeachristian.com. And I'm here to do what I do. Right now I'm continuing with this 12-segment brief introduction, and we're in set 3 of that. So we're going to do 9, 10, and 11, and then the summary, and that'll conclude this 12-section segment. And in this section, what we're talking about is reality. Now, we don't have time to go through all the philosophical underpinnings of epistemological perspectives and how all of these things interrelate historically and so on and so on. I'm going to try to break this down real simple. And I'm going to try to look at 3 questions. What is science? What is history? What is truth? And first we're going to look at science. What is science? Science today is a catch term that has somehow endowed itself with authority. This is scientific. And we hardly understand what that means. It used to be that science was basically a method. Science was the results of the empirical method. Now that's what we might call true science or pure science. If I can't test it in a laboratory, if I can't look at it with my eyeballs, and then do an experiment, and then turn it over to you, and you repeat the same experiment and get the same results, that's not science. Now today we take that word and we say, well, science is any systematic, organized area of study. Or science is the opinion of most scientists. Well, today we don't even believe that truth exists, so it's no wonder that we've broken down this idea of science. But we need to get back to recognizing that science is what I can verify in a laboratory. And that science is not objective. Now, they did an interesting study one time where they tested scientists. And what they used was the definition of light. Now, there's a big debate in science. Is light a particle? Is light a wave? Is light a particle? Is light a wave? Is light both? You get all kinds of very firm opinions on that, and the reality is we can't figure that out. So what they did was they first tested the bias. They first figured out which scientists believed the light was a particle and which ones believed that it was a wave. And then they said, we're going to do an experiment. And the experiment was supposed to tell us whether light was a particle or a wave. And we still don't know how to figure that out. The experiment didn't prove that one way or the other. But those scientists who went into it with the presuppositional bias that light was a particle came to the conclusion that the experiment proved light was a particle. And those scientists who went into it with the presuppositional bias that light was a wave came to the conclusion that the experiment proved light was a wave. So even in empirical science, you have the data, but you have to interpret that data. So science has all of these philosophical underpinnings. We talked about some of the myths in terms of radiometric dating and the philosophical biases behind that. And all of science has this philosophical bias. You know, what you believe before you go into it makes a difference. That's why it's so important to understand that the basis for real science, the basis for true science, is what the scriptures teach, is faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Recognize that we have these presuppositional biases. Accept the reality of our presuppositional biases. Now, an honest scientist is going to tell you what their presuppositional bias is. But we have so many today who are so cocky, so arrogant, so confident that my bias is true, even to question my bias. Why, that's unscientific. No, that has nothing to do with science. It's philosophical. I gave some presentations at a local college, and several of the students told me that one particular professor used to, still does as far as I know, basically tell the Christians that if they didn't believe in macroevolution, they were stupid. So I told him, hey, I'll buy you lunch. I'll buy you coffee. I would just like to hear your arguments in support of that. He refused to have coffee with me, refused to have lunch with me, and I was buying. Hey, it was the arrogance. He told me in an email that if I didn't believe what he was saying, and that what he was saying was very popular, then obviously we didn't have anything to talk about. This is an academic institution, and this is common. Science is not consensus. Science is not what most people believe. Science is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Science is the stuff that verifies the hypothesis. And even there, we analyze the data based on our presuppositions. You find a bone, it doesn't have a date. You find an artifact, it doesn't have a date. Your presuppositional bias is that which is, we talked about that strainer on our head. Remember that discussion? So science, in its purest sense, is the results of the empirical method. And in its purest sense, the biases, the presuppositional biases of the one interpreting the data will tell you what their bias is. And they will recognize that it's a bias. Today, so many people who call themselves scientists